Great. So my question is, Seattle is 5th in the nation for LGBT population with 4.8% and growing. And we are, like other cities, DC, Philadelphia, Boston, which has a similar population size, Chicago, those cities have paid offices of LGBTQ affairs. These are positions that advise government on operations, policies, community engagement, and provide training and technical assistance. Seattle has had a number of laws and policies in the books, but it appears as though the city has not implemented these policies until incidents occur. For example, a city employee had a negative experience transitioning on the job in a city department, and then data is not consistently collected on LGBTQ people in the city. And so that has affected things like the Seattle Comprehensive Plan for 2035. If elected, would you advocate for adding an Office of LGBTQ Affairs? Why or why not? And how do you plan to engage with the LGBTQ residents of Seattle, particularly on issues of inequality?
That's a great question, thank you. And I can just say from my time as the director of the tenants union, one of my biggest frustrations was that Seattle has a lot of laws about tenants' rights, but they go unenforced. And I have a lot of experience about how we can go about addressing those things, because I think that's not just a landlord-tenant issue, that's something that impacts all laws, right? We pass these very grandiose-sounding legislation, but it's just wet ink on paper, essentially. So I would be a very strong proponent for creating a LGBTQIA affairs office. And the reason is that we need a watchdog for the city to make sure that those laws are enforced. We need to make sure that the Seattle Office of Civil Rights is doing its due diligence in enforcing our civil rights laws. And I think that we saw a lot of evidence and strides made when we have done, when we have created similar institutions in other areas, like when we created the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, right? So we know that this is a good model for good governance. It's a good model for making sure the laws on the books are enforced, and I would be a very strong proponent for it.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I think that we need to create an Office of LGBTQIA Affairs, make sure that they're working with the community, but also, maybe more importantly, to make sure that the city is being responsive to our community needs. I'm thinking about housing discrimination, working with the Office of Labor Standards to make sure our LGBTQIA community isn't being subject to wage theft, discrimination, retaliation, and also making sure that we're looking at healthcare outcomes. If we are not getting counted, if the community is not getting counted, then they don't matter. And as somebody who's worked in public health for a number of years, we know how critical it is to actually get data on who's being served and who's underserved. If you're not even on the survey, then resources don't go there. So I'd be really interested in, yes, creating an office, but maybe more importantly, getting the data that we need. I want to make sure that we also get contracts out to our friends. I just heard that this is like one of the biggest cities in the country that doesn't actually provide direct contracts to our LGBTQIA nonprofits. So Ingersoll, where you at? I'm making sure that we have community folks who are trusted in our community getting the resources so that we have trusted voices talking to those who most need those services.
Well, not only am I in favor of creating such an office, the important thing is that we listen to the real people of Seattle, and that doesn't often happen. A dear friend of mine is a senior, he's HIV positive, he's in subsidized housing, and he feels oppressed and picked upon all the time. He is having battles constantly with the nonprofit that runs the apartment building he's in. And those are the people we need to be listening to, and not the developers or not the people in the suits that can make it to a city council meeting in the middle of a workday. So I would make myself accessible. I would be there at night. I want the city council to have some evening meetings. I want people to maybe videotape their testimony, and it can be aired at a meeting where they don't have to necessarily be present for it to count and be on the record. And we need to make sure that our Office of Civil Rights is protecting everyone. So at a forum just 2 days ago, a trans gentleman came up to me and said that he's being harassed and being discriminated against in terms of getting housing. This has got to change.